Alan Wake 2 is one of the best looking video games ever made. With beautiful lighting and intricate asset detail, it's a bit of a technical showcase, especially on PC with path tracing enabled. The PS5 release also looks brilliant, as I covered in a video last week, with the same beautiful visuals bereft of some path tracing niceties and with some image quality issues. But I didn't have time in that earlier video to do a deep dive on the differences between the performance and quality modes present in the console versions of the game, and I didn't have an opportunity to look at Xbox consoles at all. So what are the mode differences? And is there any meaningful advantage for PS5 or Series X? And what downgrade should Series S owners expect on their pint-sized machines? On PS5 and Series X, Alan Wake offers a quality mode and a performance mode, which target 30 and 60 frames per second respectively. Remedy has gone a lot further than just tweaking resolution here, however, and have cut back a range of settings to hit the higher performance mode target, though most of these alterations are fairly subtle. We'll start by comparing the two modes on Series X, and we'll loop back to PS5 in a bit. Most obviously, the density of environmental objects is decreased quite a lot in the performance mode. Plants that are present in the quality mode are often entirely absent when we switch to performance. Grass also tends to see a reduction in density, with a more sparse, patchy appearance. Scattered leaves and rocks are similarly thinned out. Both modes look perfectly fine on their own terms, but the quality mode looks significantly more lush in head-to-heads, with abundant, thick foliage. While we're looking at the terrain, the performance mode also seems to have a slightly cruder terrain surface, with less obvious displacement foreground details. This is most obvious up close, where the ground clearly features less geometry than the quality mode. Texture filtering takes a hit too. If you look at the ground here, the texture detail tends to blur more severely when viewed perpendicular to the camera. Most of the time it doesn't make a huge difference, but distant texture detail in particular doesn't resolve well in the performance mode. The actual resolution of in-game textures does seem to be unchanged however, as both resolve similar detail levels at close range. Volumetric lighting also encounters some obvious cutbacks. In this shot, the performance mode has less distinct volumetrics, without the detailed rays we see in quality mode. Resolution has been cut back somewhat to hit the harsher frame time target. Fog quality is dialed down as well, with a less pleasing presentation here. Next up is shadow quality. The performance mode's shadows are less comprehensive, so distant objects, like the flag here or this NPC, don't have shadows. Neither mode looks great here, but the quality mode does have obviously better shadow coverage. Shadow resolution, though, usually looks about the same between the two. There are some exceptions, like the shadows from the string on the caseboard here, but most of the time apparent shadow resolution seems similar, if not the same. This post provides a good example. You can see how both modes feature the same aliased edges in the exact same places. Most of the difference in typical play comes down to shadow filtering, which operates at a higher quality level in the quality mode. Edges have a more defocused appearance, and shadows have a slightly smoother look, helping to minimize the appearance of aliasing. As I flip back and forth here, notice how the smaller branches become more indistinct in the quality mode. It's a subtle difference that again is only really noticeable in a close appraisal of the two modes. There are a couple of other settings that have been changed as well. LOD settings are more aggressive in the performance mode, so pop-in is more intrusive and occurs closer to the player view. Global illumination takes a hit too, so certain details, like Saga's hair, showcase less accurate lighting in the performance mode. Screen space reflections appear noticeably improved in the quality mode as well, with a less grainy and better defined appearance, though this is just a byproduct of the differences in rendering resolution between the two modes. With visual settings out of the way, let's move on to the resolution metrics. The Series X version renders at 1270p in quality mode, with a 4K FSR2 output resolution. In performance mode, we're looking at an 847p resolution, with an output of 1440p. There is some difference between the two modes in stills, but image stability in motion is really where the two modes differ. The performance mode has quite a bit more breakup on fine details, like the fences here and the power lines. Fine foliage details in particular pose an issue for the image reconstruction, as the FSR2 struggles to maintain a smooth image, especially in the performance mode. Image quality is one of the few areas where Alan Wake's console code doesn't excel, and the results can be messy at times, especially with lots of specular detail or with fine foliage elements like tree branches. The combination of a third-person perspective, lots of dynamic lighting, and somewhat aggressive resolution targets throws up issues for the FSR2 here, with an understandable but annoying hit to image quality. And what about PS5? We've been looking at the Series X version so far, but the PS5 is more or less a mirror image of the Series X code. Across a range of tests, I couldn't spot any real differences favoring either console. Key problem areas on the Series X, like a pretty messy shadow resolve and mediocre screen space reflections, recur identically on the PS5 as far as I can tell. That holds true across both the quality modes and the performance modes on both respective systems. And resolution-wise, we're still at a 1270p, 847p split in quality and performance mode respectively, with the same image quality concerns we saw on Xbox. Frame rates are where the two systems diverge. Series X, for its part, delivers a very smooth rendition of Alan Wake. In performance mode, the X offers close to a locked 60 FPS, with uncommon exceptions. We can drop a frame or two sometimes during traversal, and there are a few moments that cause momentary frame rate drops, but the game feels quite smooth in general play. The consistency of the turnout here is surprising, and speaks to how scalable the game is on the GPU, and to how accommodating Alan Wake 2 can be towards lower-end CPU hardware. Quality mode is even more stable. In my capture, only this moment in the overlap caused any issues at all, and it poses issues for all other console platforms as well, so there's no particular problem on Series X here. Everywhere else the game runs at a locked 30 frames per second, with no deviations that I could see. Again, Alan Wake 2 is delivering great results, despite the highly advanced visual presentation. PS5 doesn't fare quite as well. Certain areas really struggle in the performance mode, like this forested section, which runs consistently in the 50s. We see occasional dips elsewhere as well, with a bit of an unstable feel in typical play. The frame rate delta against the Series X is surprising, as you can see here, with the PS5 consistently failing to reach its frame time target in some missions. The same is true in the quality mode. The PS5 is just running up against the 33.3 millisecond frame budget all the time, at least in tougher areas like the second Saga Anderson mission. Performance is a bit more stable here as you might expect, and most of the time the game does achieve its 30 FPS target. But the results are a bit more mixed than you typically expect from a 30 FPS current-gen game. Beyond frame rates, Alan Wake 2 is also pretty nimble, and tends to load quite quickly. This load to an identical location across the two consoles takes about 7 seconds and 9 seconds respectively, with the PS5 being the slightly faster machine. The game uses video sequences to mask loading between locations, but these can be skipped after a few seconds. Spider-Man 2 it is not, but Alan Wake's loading won't test your patience at all. Microsoft's junior current-gen console, the svelte Series S, does tend to struggle with some of the more boundary-pushing pieces of current-gen software. So how does it cope with Alan Wake 2? Alan Wake 2 runs with a 30 FPS target on Series S, with no option to engage a higher framerate mode. This is pretty common in Series S games, where high framerate options often impose an image quality penalty that is simply too large, at least when it comes to particularly demanding titles. Beyond that concession though, the Series S acquits itself decently well, as the visual settings are very similar to the Series X performance mode. Object density is about the same, with an identical rendition of the grass in this shot. Shadow quality is identical. Again, look at the matching sawtooth edges on the wood pole, the similar aliasing pattern from the foliage on the white van, or the missing NPC and flag shadows in both shots here. Volumetric lights also appear to have the same rather limited resolution on both systems. Textures do throw up a bit of a difference. Most textures seem to be a complete match between the two machines here. These signs are a good example. But in the Mind place, the caseboard textures clearly have a much lower resolution on Series S. The text in particular looks pretty messy on the S, although the accompanying photographs also look less distinct. Screen space reflections are also degraded a bit on the S. The static grain pattern seems slightly more prominent, and detail is muddier in the reflected image. I don't think that stems from a visual settings downgrade though. It's more likely to be a byproduct of the game's lower rendering resolution. Internally, the Series S is operating at or around 720p. That's down from the 847p resolution in the Series X performance mode. Output resolution, though, remains at 1440p, as the two consoles exhibit very similar clarity in stills, and the rare snippet of UI that isn't anti-aliased comes in at a 1440p pixel count. When moving through the game world, it's easier to spot aliasing on the Series S version. Neither console is really covering itself in glory here, but I'd prefer the Series X image overall. Performance-wise, the Series S manages a pretty stable 30 FPS, with an update that is a bit more consistent than PS5, but falls slightly short of its more powerful sibling. There are some occasional moments in tougher areas like this wooded section where it can drop frames, though it tends to be well behaved elsewhere. For a cut-price console, I think the Series S is delivering a perfectly fine update here, and the excellent motion blur and slower paced gameplay render the lack of a 60 FPS option less of an issue than it would be in many other titles. The premier Alan Wake experience is undoubtedly on the PC platform, with frankly incredible path trace lighting, excellent image quality courtesy of DLSS, and the potential for high frame rates. It comprehensively bests the console code. But the consoles still look excellent in their own right, with top-class visuals even absent some of the PC versions, tempting visual treats. For those players who are looking for good experience on consoles, I think all systems do a reasonable enough job. The performance and quality modes on the premium current-gen machines are also well calibrated, with the performance option looking great despite the halved frame time target. But the Series X has a notable and unexpected performance advantage, running a good deal faster than the PS5 in taxing scenarios, making it the console of choice for now. Series S also puts in a commendable effort, essentially running the other system's performance mode at 30 FPS with a slightly lower resolution. Given the Series S's issues with raw GPU performance and RAM allocation, I'm surprised that Alan Wake 2 has managed to deliver good visuals here. All consoles do exhibit certain issues though. Shadows suffer from considerable aliasing, screen space reflections have a grainy appearance that doesn't look very pleasing, and image quality is questionable at times, with the performance modes and Series S most badly affected, which likely stems from aggressive upsampling targets combined with challenging visual content. The game does suffer from some bugs as well, including some cutscene audio sync errors on the Xbox versions, so it may be worth holding off for a while patches are deployed. But overall, I'd say that Alan Wake 2 is a great experience on console systems. This is a real visual accomplishment on the consoles, delivering well-calibrated visuals even on the Series S. There's still room for improvement, and the PS5 needs a bit of retooling to run at more consistent frame rates, but it's a truly impressive game. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and press the bell for YouTube notifications. Check out the Patreon at digitalfoundry.net for exclusive and early access content. And to get in touch, use social media. Thanks for watching.